All right, that's everybody. So I will call this meeting to order at 9:32 a.m. We are meeting digitally per Public Act 1010640. Can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Blazik?
Here.
O'Davis?
Here.
Bussey?
Here.
Patrill?
Here.
Jenkins?
Here.
Milivek?
Here.
Whitman?
Here.
Awesome. We do not appear to have any visitors. Is that correct?
Let's just introduce the SWAN staff.
SWAN staff.
Aaron Skog, SWAN Executive Director.
Dawn Tortorella, Assistant Director.
Ginny Blake, Business Manager.
Great. No public. Is there any public comment at this time? Can we have a motion to accept the February 19th, 2021 SWAN Board meeting agenda?
I move.
And a second?
I second.
And a roll call.
Okay. Blazik?
Yes.
O'Davis?
Yes.
Bussey?
Yes.
Patrill?
Yes.
Jenkins?
Yes.
Milivek?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Thank you. A motion to approve the SWAN financials for the month of January.
I move.
And a second?
I second.
Any discussion or questions? Lately, Aaron, in your report, you've been giving really detailed information.
Yeah,
The financial.
That helps and moves us along.
Yeah, I find that super helpful. I don't.
Okay, good.
The rest of you do too.
Yes.
Are there
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. If there are no questions, then can we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Blazik?
Yes.
O'Davis?
Yes.
Bussey?
Yes.
Patrill?
Yes.
Jenkins?
Yes.
Milivek?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Where are we? Can we have a motion to accept the January 22nd, 2021 board meeting minutes?
I move.
And a second?
I second.
There are some corrections. Stacy, do you want to let us know what those are?
Sure. There was just the results of the vote were missing from action item 7, I believe, and then it looked like maybe they got kind of pushed down to the bottom of the document. I'm not sure if I had proposed that might have been what happened, and so I emailed that to Aaron and Ted, and Aaron said that they would fix it.
Thank you. Any other changes? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Blazik?
Yes.
O'Davis?
Yes.
Bussey?
Yes.
Patrill?
Yes.
Jenkins?
Yes.
Milivek?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And a motion to approve the extremely long and detailed committee of the whole meeting minutes.
I move.
And a second?
Yes. I second.
Okay, I'm assuming because there are only 7 words on that, there's no discussion. Can we have a roll
These are
call,
my
please?
favorite minutes ever. How about that?
The meeting was 30 minutes.
With no questions.
No question.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a period at the end of that sentence. That's my addition, I would suggest.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, roll call, please.
Okay. Blazik?
Yes.
O'Davis?
Yes.
Bussey?
Yes.
Patrill?
Yes.
Jenkins?
Yes.
Milivek?
Yes.
Whitman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Aaron, you want to explain what this transfer is?
Yes. So action item number 7 is a SWAN fund transfer from operating to money market. Back in July, we had done this transfer from the market to operating. we're now sort of flush in operations. So this is the exact same amount going back. At first I thought maybe we just leave it knowing that we might be doing this again in July, but I do want to maybe eke out as much interest as we can possibly can in the money market. So my recommendation was to do the transfer, and we'll just have to accept that we'll do this, you know, maybe back and forth during the course of one fiscal year.
All right, great. Yeah, I think we all understand that and do similar things with our own money. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
I move.
And a second?
I second.
And a roll call?
Okay, Blazik,
Yes.
O'Davis,
Yes.
Bussey,
Yes.
Trill,
Yes.
Jenkins,
Yes.
Millibeck.
Yes.
Whitman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. My report is a reminder that, believe it or not, we have an election coming up, a SWAN board election. So just by way of background, the two terms that are ending are Stacy and Julie, and they're both at their term limits. So there are no incumbents in this. I'm not crying. I have something in my eye. There are no incumbents in this election. So we will have two new trustees joining us in July. And part of our responsibility as board members sometimes is recruitment, particularly at times like these when there are no incumbents. So these are big shoes to fill. We should all be thinking about people we may know who are interested and suited for the board. We have 3 new libraries to consider, a whole lot of things to think about. So some years, some election cycles, all kinds of people put their names out, and some election cycles, it's like pulling teeth. So hopefully there'll be all sorts of names out, but be thinking and planting that seed within your own regions to let people know that this is going to be happening pretty soon. Aaron and I haven't worked out the dates exactly, but we'll have those soon. Certainly by quarterly, where we'll make the announcement of the vacancies and encourage people at that point. Additionally, amongst us, both Stacy and Julie are officers. So there's going to be some, moving around of officers, as there potentially is every year. So be thinking about those positions, all of the positions, President Cottrell. If you are interested in taking anything on, I'm sure we're all interested in hearing what that might be. So that's all I have to say, and I'll pass it on to Aaron.
Thank you, Ted. So for this month's packet, there's a few things in here that normally I don't like to bring something forward just for an approval without some sort of discussion ahead of time. But this SWAN user agreement is something that we've been working on more or less behind the scenes, and I felt it was best if we brought this forward as a policy for us to have the board approve. If there's concerns about it and we want to, table the vote, that's something we can do. What we were looking at within this user agreement was eventually, as we start moving more and more into just cloud-based services, we're going to need, a good way to ensure that library staff or library management leadership at our member libraries understand that, they're going to have to really not only pay attention when they have turnover at their libraries or onboarding new staff, how these accounts and logins are going to be managed. So we'll do a lot of technical setup behind the scenes to sort of, help with all this. Directory service is something that we're going to be focused on, which will, manage this and manage password complexities and such. But we felt at this stage what was happening, what Stephen was doing every time he had to issue a Blue Cloud account, he would have this staff member, the individual person, go over and sign off on basically an agreement. And I wanted to move this more towards the direction that we set a policy and just have that just stated as far as what the library's are expected of. So we'll be talking about that a little later in the agenda. The SWAN budget is pretty much ready. There was definitely just a few folks that came to me after the budget presentation to ask about a few things, Carol Stream and Stickney. And then also we had a few discussions internally about a couple of budget lines that we felt like maybe we should just collapse now before we get to the next years. As much as I like our new budget structure, there was just a few spots where I'm like, this is a little too much granularity. Let's just combine these lines. It doesn't change the numbers at all. But the bond payments for Carol Stream and Stickney did affect their fees. So in a just in the way the formula works, that revenue is made up across the remaining libraries, 93 public libraries. But I don't think it shifted anyone's fees dramatically at all. The other thing that we'll be looking at is I've got the Aspen Discovery contract ready to go. So we have talked about doing a March, membership approval. Really what we're looking at is the start date is that we would be, aiming towards starting this at the end of March so next month. We'll do an Aspen pilot update at our March quarterly meeting. But as we start to roll out to our libraries, that's when a payment is due to Bywater. So what I didn't want is just have $85,000 up front. We roll out to 20 libraries, and then I can't imagine at this point that we find something egregious with the Aspen product and have to stop our rollout and sit on it for a year. We'd only be, out the amount of money that we paid for those 20 libraries. So we're going to do it in phases. But this agreement also gives us a lock-in for the price for the next 2 years following. So I think we're at that point where we should get the agreement in place, lock in what we're talking about with Bywater as far as the number of libraries we're going to add on in a given cycle. And then this next year we'll run Aspen and Enterprise, concurrently, and then we'll be looking, hopefully, knock on wood, that if it all goes well, we can talk to Cersei Dynex about dropping Enterprise for the May 1 renewal next year. So that's a contract that I'll have as an approval next month. I did complete the new director's orientation yesterday. I guess for you all, there was quite a few folks that were registered. There were 16 registered. Of course, we did have 10 in attendance, and not all were directors. Some are administrators, like the one of the staff at the Theosophical Society was in attendance. So I did. Dawn did help me with that and did record that session. So we will be able to post it for any on-demand viewing for any directors that are new, if I can get them a quick video. And we had a few at the end. We had some good discussion as far as needing to get a better understanding of Blue Cloud Analytics. For example, the director of Oak Lawn was there. She's new. She was I think their public services manager in Hammond, Indiana. So they're the new director at Oak Lawn. And then William Leonard was also in attendance. So we got some folks that are kind of new, have been around Illinois enough to understand enough about Consortia and SWAN. So I think it was good. The membership voting platform, I hope that you found that was easy to use. I did include the canned reports that came out, and I did get from my direct vote the listing of how all the directors that participated and voted. So what I'll do is I'll be incorporating that as official minutes, I would say, for approval at March quarterly, if that makes sense. that was a vote that took place, and we'll just include that in the minutes. So we talked about the fund transfer. Oh, the internal controls. Yeah, so we can talk more when we get to that, but it's just a nice little feature that we've Ginny brought to our attention about being able to use a bill pay feature in Hinsdale. It'd be very similar to if you use bill pay for your own personal banking, but it does pose some issues for the way some of our internal controls is currently structured, where every check has 2 signatures. So in looking over the internal controls, I feel that what we really wanted bill pay for was just a very limited use, just for, you know, the rent and utilities. Those are the ones that become urgent and have a short due date. But that said, you know, at 59 cents per transaction, it's not a bad price if we wanted to think about using bill pay to do a lot more of our checks. I have no problem with continuing the arrangement of using the stamp and signature and Ginny having to print all that, but it is something to think about that it would streamline things. We can talk more later. And you may have seen my SWANcom go out about the EBSCO opt-out. To up till this email this morning, only 3 libraries had opted out. But there were at least 1 or 2 directors that replied to an email that I sent earlier that had me a little concerned when they were saying, sorry I didn't get a chance to vote. I would have voted to remain in the deal, which made me think, I don't know if they thought that they were voting to remain in the deal or voting to then indicate they're opting out. So I sent that email out today. What my stated goal was to give everyone some pricing on Monday just to show what it looks like if they are still looking to make a decision. At least one library that we know of has approached EBSCO for some pricing on their own, which is fine. I don't know whether or not they're going to find better pricing from EBSCO than what the SWAN deal gives them, but at least that's one that we've heard of. The staff member contacted Robin about that. And we've gone over the financials, and we'll be talking about the SWAN quarterly meeting agenda later. That's the end of my report, and we have the operations report next. As you can see, things continue with, you know, a lot of frequency with SWAN staff being able to work with our libraries remotely, I would say very effectively. The SWAN 100 project, well, this is probably the last update you're going to see about that. The training concluded. Sandy Whitmer was at the orientation program yesterday, and I think you're right. We may see some interest from some of our new directors in SWAN governance, or at least some committees that we may have later. Dawn, is there anything you want to add about KitKeeper here? I think you stated things quite nicely in your write-up.
Yeah, we're making progress on the KitKeeper and getting feedback primarily from Lauren Maxwell at Geneva and Lizzie Mikowski at Downers Grove. They're very encouraged by it. It has a lot of usability problems that we at SWAN are concerned about, but functionality for the staff, it's very advantageous. So we're kind of working with the Plymouth Rocket to get over some of those usability concerns that we have while Lizzie and Lauren are testing the functionality. And we've set up some procedures and policies that libraries will be able to follow. And I think we'll be rolling it out to more libraries pretty soon. Julie, I don't know if you've got any feedback from Lizzie about it.
Lizzie is really optimistic about this product. She was never, I don't think she ever had the expectation that this would really be something that would be generally used by non-library staff, at least not in its current iteration. That usability piece is, yeah, it's a challenge, but on the staff side, it functions really well. It does the things they want it to do.
Yeah, so we're encouraged by it, and I think it's going to be a tool for libraries and a way that they can share. You know, here kind of just
Yeah.
looking at the screen prints, I mean, you kind of get an idea of we've got some usability issues on the admin side, but we're working through them with the company and hope to make improvements.
Yeah, and just to be able to share more effectively among libraries will be huge, so that, you know, we all get more use out of these kits that so many of us have and would be willing to share, and you know, maybe not have different collections and access to different materials and different libraries. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, and I think it will be helpful too in so many of our libraries, you know, stitch together kits, you know, by putting together holds across the consortium for copies and then pulling them together and trying to maneuver all that timing. So hopefully we will make this process easier for book club moderators.
Absolutely.
Don, thanks for including the write-up on the reciprocal borrower's limit change. I do know that I did hear from Stacy about that change. I just wanted to acknowledge that Stacy, there was a little delay in getting back to Peggy to talk with your circulation manager, but we followed up yesterday. Dawn was on vacation once the SWAN 100 project was done, I was like, take a week off. But the reciprocal borrower changes, I feel at least in terms of when we're doing this, because we have these coordinated centrally by SWAN, we're always going to have some libraries, and Eisenhower being particularly, you know, sensitive to changes to the CPL borrower profile, that I want to make sure that maybe we'll just say that we need to have those lines of communication a little bit more streamlined with Eisenhower. But I don't know, Stacy, do you want to add anything here in terms of moving the Chicago to 8 holds?
Well, I can tell you that even if the statistics don't show a huge increase in the number of Chicago people who have holds above 5, we noticed almost immediately that it was possible. And my staff had, prior to that, been engaged in constructing sort of workarounds to be able to hold additional materials for people who came up for curbside, since we couldn't place the holds in SWAN. So it came as a big surprise when, you know, we tried to place a hold and it let us, because we fully expect, you know, we have some super users who continually hit their limit. So, you know, our people notice immediately. And it does impact us, you know, even if it's just in terms of staff time spent to figure out what's going on, and just trying to figure out how to message to Chicago patrons. I mean, certainly it's good for them. We're just concerned about what will happen if the hold threshold goes back down. So that's our biggest.
Well, I think our feeling is that since the Chicago threshold went up to 8, our intentions are really to match theirs, because it gives us that good balance of reciprocity with our largest sharing library system. So we're planning to keep it at the Chicago limit of 8.
Okay.
But Stacy, you're saying if Chicago goes back down to 5 and SWAN goes back down to 5, you'll just have another messaging.
It's hard to take things away from people. Let's just put it that.
Yeah, it is.
Any other questions from the board on these limits. We were, for example, we were hearing from an Aurora patron reached out to us directly at SWAN about bumping into the limit. So it is interesting that some of these folks have become very aware of this and know how to reach out to the organization.
Yeah, and
Dawn,
it was just
go ahead.
an odd dynamic of not only was it the hold limit, it was the blocking limit, so the fact that you were quarantining and different libraries had different quarantining times, it just led to this catch-22 where these patrons would like have to visit the library and then be on hiatus for a couple weeks, and then they could come back. So they were like cresting waves instead of kind of a steady engagement with the library. So that's kind of why we made those immediate changes, because it was happening due to the new closures that libraries were having. They couldn't go in and get materials. But we'll be talking about it at Fireside too on Tuesday.
Yeah, along with the move to 1-day quarantine of material. I think you all would have seen that by now. If you hadn't, it went out on the director's list, but we'll be talking about at the Fireside that Rails is changing the quarantine period to just 24 hours, which is, I think came with maybe some pressure from some libraries on Rails to do that. So we'll use the Fireside on the 23rd to sort of dig into this a little bit more. Dawn, did we hear, you attended the CERC users meeting. Was there much that was shared there? Because that was like breaking news during that morning.
It was. I think most libraries we were hearing from were glad, and they were going to go down to the 24-hour threshold, but others were going to stay steady at whatever they were currently doing. Had no plans to make any changes at this time.
Well, and can I just say that the timing of that change was particularly interesting, considering that American Libraries published the results of the Realm study that showed how long the virus lives on different surfaces, and it didn't come with any like detailed explanation. It was just like, it stays on this surface for 7 days. It stays on this surface for this long. And so I had staff from my library say to me, hey, did you see this? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, what do you think about this in terms of quarantining? And I said, well, we're trying to be very careful, et cetera. And then Rails comes out and says, hey, 24 hours. So, I think that library staff members are aware of the publication of that. So it just seemed kind of strange that they chose to do it right at that same time. I don't know, maybe they didn't realize that it was going to be published.
And there's been a lot of talk around the Realm study and the fact that it's that it goes to any measurable amount of virus, not what amount of virus is likely to cause any sort of contact. At what threshold is it really a danger, and at what threshold is it any common germ or really able to make you sick?
Right. But this is what library staff saw, like this big chart, so like.
I know.
It's really
I know.
That where the virus lives, but.
Right. The decision had actually been made a little bit more than a week before it was announced. So the timing of it, I think it just was a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn, thank you for supplying these statistics, also in the operations report, as far as like seeing where things are at for member libraries. And I don't know if there's anything you want to call out here, or if the board has questions about.
Well, I think one important measure is February 3rd. We saw the largest daily circulation since November 14th. So we had a lot of libraries reopen on February 1st. So we saw that pretty immediately.
And holds remains, very steady.
Yeah, holds are steady, constantly growing. Yeah, so people are using holds, that's for sure.
It'll be interesting to see if some of these changes in usage hold up once this is all over next year.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that overall our circulation for the year was down 50%, but our transits were only down 35%. So that kind of shows that resource sharing is even kind of more critical than pre-COVID because people aren't being able to go into the libraries and browse as much as they had in the past. So they're placing holds and those get filled throughout.
All right, so the bibliographic services, I think it's worth noting how involved Scott Brandwine is now within this catalog. It shouldn't be a surprise that our bibliographic data would require a bibliographic services manager to really give a lot of focus and attention on this. But Dawn, I think it's worth saying that we're very impressed with what Scott is doing within this project.
Yeah, Scott just is, his expertise and his, creative way of solving problems, we're really starting to see the benefits quite clearly in our catalog. With Aspen, we're doing a lot of just analysis of how we should group records, how we might be considering cataloging a little bit differently to take advantage of some of the bibliographic analysis that Aspen is doing. And Scott and his team have gone through a massive cleanup of these call numbers that have the wrong indicators. The Pipe C specifically, where volumes are being attached to monographs incorrectly. And I actually think that we may be close to solving this problem across the curriculum. It will continue to pop up and we will do periodic reviews of it. But this has been a long-standing problem that I don't think we even realized the magnitude of it until a lot of eyes were on the pull list during our most recent closures. So it's like this problem got a really focused look over the past couple months. And this is why I think some of our holds management appeared to not be working correctly over the past. It's because people were placing holds on a specific volume, which was incorrectly cataloged, which made it then be volume specific to that library's item. So we're very optimistic that that's going to really improve a lot of things with that catalog cleanup.
I'll just say that this was there's a lot of credit here to sleuthing out what this issue was. It has to go to Dawn kind of working with Scott on this. We were getting tickets submitted about holds issues. So, a few libraries were very persistent in, showing us that there was something going on with holds being placed. And, initially when we internally sat down and started talking about what was going on, it was difficult to kind of take into account all the changes that had just occurred over our consortium. If you think about what was going on with library closures, having to shut down resource sharing, libraries coming in and out of resource sharing. But I have to discredit that what they found was something that was a deeper issue that has been around for a while. So it's interesting that library staff were picking up on this and reporting this to us. So it felt like it was a new issue, but as Dawn is noting here, or Scott has noted here, at least in his section, that this may be as going back far back as to 2015. So big cleanup that's just got completed. So we're hoping that the library staff that were noting this to us will find that our cleanup has had a very positive impact. You'll see also within Stephen's report, we do have work underway on our SVA replacement. You might recall that SVA did go down late on wasn't that on a Friday, Dawn?
It was,
They worked,
yeah.
They worked all weekend on it to get it back up. So that has also, you know, really helped us to just say the priority right now is we got to get off of this older phone dialer, and we're working with Unique Management to take care of that service. So the good news is that that's moving along fairly well with Stephen getting all those setups done, coordinating with Unique Management. Unique has always been a good partner with SWAN. And the other thing that we have going on is moving some of these are virtual servers. They're not physical boxes in the Rails data center, but they are virtually living in Rails virtual servers. I mean, they're physical servers in their virtual environment. So we're going to be moving all these out over the next several months into SWAN's Azure environment. So really, I mean, the thing that I've talked about, at least in our budget, is, you know, come July 1, we're really have kind of turned the page on that whole 10-year chapter for SWAN, you know, sort of separating from system. It will be really pretty much finalized by June 30th, if not sooner. You know, we'll be relying on them for state funding and delivery, but a lot of what we've had as far as that goes, SWAN will be fully independent, very much like, I would say, like the CCS consortium, or, you know, trying to think of another one in the state that is independent as CCS. Not really. Prairie Cat's on their way. Let's move on.
Just want to make a note of this web services outage. We did experience some outages with Enterprise, and it was all related to EBSCO Novelist on-the-shelf product. That is something that we can't support at the consortium level. So we're trying to make that clear to EBSCO. We have made it clear to EBSCO. So as libraries reach out for them with interest in that product, they know that SWAN can't support it. Basically, what it does is it allows you to embed in various services availability by looking up to see if that particular item and any related to it. Just think of what Novelist does. If it returned, tell me if this item is available. There's no way for it to look at just that item of that library. So it's making a call across all of SWAN, bringing back availability throughout the consortium. And it just basically, those web service calls end up crashing Enterprise. So due to our volume, we just can't support that.
So in addition to Scott's write-up on Aspen, so Tara's writing up on the Aspen pilot, and I've approached Tara about doing an update at the March quarterly. I wonder how you all feel, if directors are eager to hear more about what's going on with Aspen, and you know, certainly letting them know that we'd be looking at moving into the next phase of that agreement with Bywater seems to be appropriate. Do you get a sense that people think that this Aspen pilot or the project is sort of a done deal, or is it just, it's still a little confusing to folks?
I don't know, Aaron. I mean, I think an update on something this significant is a good idea. I'm not sure how people feel. I mean, I know my staff is like, can we get it? Can we get it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I
Same with
think
my
that's,
staff. I think it's
yeah,
a
I
great
think,
deal of curiosity to know what's coming and how fast it's coming.
yeah, so I think an update would be well advised.
And just the usability testing results was so interesting. My PR manager observed throughout that process, and she was just fascinated not only by the usability testing process, but by the patron reaction. Even though, you know, there were some glitches, they struggled with a couple of things, by and large, the patrons were like, yes, can we have this? Like right now, I want this.
Yeah.
They were 100% on board. So it was, that part was amazing to see. And I think our patrons are going to be as happy as the staff in getting this up and running.
Dawn, when you say the virtual usability testing has worked quite well for us.
Yeah, it has. It's actually been really good to capture that.
Our question here at Glen Ellen has been, how do we know which one of the groups of 20 plus each library falls into for the rollout of this new product?
So that's a good question. We'll have to have
We're going
ready
to
to
sell
answer
lottery
it before the-
tickets, Dawn.
All right, I want the first ticket then.
Yeah, I don't think we've thought that through.
Yeah.
We actually may not, as we get to that point, we may not divide in even groups. So there may be 30 in the next phase that let us in now. So it may be like 30, 20, 10 or something. It may be different numbers. The reality is the indexing and the setup and all of that is going on behind the scenes for all libraries. So what we're learning and doing, we're setting up across the board so that we are ready to turn on. And then we kind of do the training and the staff readiness with those future libraries.
Okay, thanks.
Crystal, the report that the UX, Crystal Vela in the user experience department did a research into the curbside and pandemic services. I was supposed to insert that report after this operations report. Instead, I have it all the way at the end of this packet. So my apologies to Crystal and you all if you're a little confused where it ended up. So it is at the bottom. Thank you, Dawn, for scrolling.
There we go.
So I found this fascinating, particularly when, you know, Crystal has also done an update on this at our last fireside and for our staff. So this is just part of what is a growing list of usability study reports that we have. Dawn, I didn't know if there was anything more you wanted to point out with this other than I found this so interesting.
I think the number one thing that, you know, we certainly don't think of at SWAN right off the bat, but you all, that's your number one challenge, the whole logistics. And as Crystal just discovered and put number one, physical space really determines the model that's going to work for you. So I found that very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like the pictures she put in too.
I do too.
Yeah, and also while the like curbside communicator and other communication things were helpful to some libraries, the majority of patrons are still just, they get there and they call, you know. So, and Downer's model of the walkie-talkies and the runners, you know, I think was very impressive, and things ran smoothly there because it was, you know, so organized, and that's probably the only way you could get it to work, Julie, is through that discipline of organization.
Yeah, and it's a very staff intensive model, but again, very much driven by the physical building and our layout, access to the areas where we can actually house the holds to be taken out, you know, to all of it. So yeah, kudos to Crystal. It was a great report.
We will pass that along to her.
So I think that concludes the operations report section. Let's see where we're at with the agenda. The board calendar. There is an outstanding item in there that we all know about. And then also, typically I would have put it in a board election timetable in this meeting packet. But Ted and I said that we'll work on that and have that ready for the quarterly meeting. And also, normally we would be talking about, do we want to do anything with our bylaws? That is on the calendar. I'm not sure if you're looking to do anything with that. Maybe just based on what Ted said in terms of having new board reps coming in and such, you would want to maybe hold off on any bylaws discussion. It just feels like, based on the fact that you all brought forward bylaws last March.
And we're still traumatized.
Yeah, yeah, that just give it another year and then maybe revisit this later. I'm hoping this e-ballot is also a way to maybe at least set up something for us to maybe that hopefully we'll see some, you know, maybe changes to open meetings in, you know, Illinois, you know, the way it's written to maybe allow a lot more of this sort of electronic attendance and these sort of systems to sort of exist without like emergency declarations and such. And let's look at our agenda.
It's the library use policy.
Okay, so let me open that up for discussion for you all. Do you have concerns around putting a policy like this in place? You know, Stephen helped draft this memo with me, with Dawn's input. We just wanted to make sure, as far as, you know, that it was clear where things were headed, that we needed a policy like this in place.
Aaron, I don't have an issue with the policy. I think it's probably a good idea. And I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but I will say it's worded very aggressively. It's and maybe that's by design and intention, but the repetition of "your library will" over and over and over throughout the document is, I don't know, maybe that's how you want it, but just so you know, that reads very aggressive. I don't know how anybody else feels, or if anybody even cares about that, but that was my only takeaway.
I did read it the same way. It really came across as a demand. And especially not having seen a draft of it before this, I was like, oh, are we doing all these things? Are we going to be in trouble? And yeah, so we may want to rethink that before we bring it before the whole group.
It would just be as simple as saying "your library will" and then bullet point everything that your library will, rather than repeat that phrase 13 times in a row. It's damn scary. I mean, it made me nervous.
Would you want to see edits like that made and then table a vote and get the approval next month, or just make that suggestion that we change that wording in that way and then move forward with approval?
I'm ready to vote now. I don't think I need to see a new draft, but I don't know how anybody else feels.
I think if it's changed the way Ted mentions it, that would be perfectly fine. I have a couple of questions about some of the bullet points.
Okay.
When it says all relevant training, is SWAN going to specify exactly what that relevant training is in bullet point 1?
Yes. And in fact, that was one of my inputs to say if we're going to say that we have relevant training, we need to have a training curriculum to support that, or like a recording that you should watch and see. Yeah.
And then my second question is, I think about, well, it's a third bullet point from the bottom. Your library will notify SWAN immediately when a staff member with SWAN LSP access is no longer employed at your library. That would be any member of the staff that has access to shared workflows passwords, right? So that shared password would be changing every single time a part-time circulation clerk left. Am I
Yeah.
understanding that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Without trying to get too far into this, it is going to the Blue Cloud platform, when we start moving into it being used for circulation with staff, it will pose some issues using shared logins, which I know is a kind of a big shift for department managers to have to figure out what does that mean. But it is something that we've already been talking about within our Blue Cloud pilot libraries, that they're going to have to start thinking, we're going to need a lot more individual logins than shared logins.
So
Yeah.
basically you're thinking when we offboard someone from our staff, we need to add to the offboarding form, notify SWAN.
Well, there's that, but also I think that there'll be, while we don't have it ready, I do think that what we're looking at when we say a directory service, I'm thinking that this would be a section of our support site that would allow libraries to, with some degree of control on their own, perhaps to deactivate staff accounts or enable new staff without a lot of SWAN staff intervention. I'll just use the example right now with Blue Cloud Analytics. We have to open up a case with Cersei Dynamics for every login that we need, and any password changes in analytics. As we move towards a Blue Cloud circulation, Blue Cloud cataloging, we'll be controlling that at SWAN, and Cersei Dynamics does have some capability to work with what's called a directory service. So my hope is that we'll be able to do, kind of these password complexity enforcements on its own. I mean, everybody sees that now when you're logging into an account with any service. They'll say you didn't enter a character or a capital letter or number. Those are the sorts of things that I would like to see our directory service do.
And Jennifer, let me just clarify your question when you said if a staff member leaves and they had access to a shared account in workflows, do we need to let SWAN know to change it? Some of the caveats regarding that right now, you can only access workflows within our libraries. So we don't have that threat of somebody accessing it from home or whatever. So it's kind of up to you if you want to go that extra security. We also know it's a barrier to service when those passwords change and your staff are caught off guard. So it's kind of, we have to balance that, but also consider if that staff member is likely to go work at another SWAN library, they have that login and password. So in that case, we do want to change them, not so much for malicious intent, but accidental. That muscle memory kicks in, and we've actually had staff that have gone to new libraries and their muscle memory just logs them into the other. And it's a very interesting problem to solve. What happened there? It's like, so I think it's your call for those. Based on disruption of staff and potential, is that person going to be at another SWAN library? Then maybe we should consider making that change.
So how would this roll out, Aaron? Like, would everybody get a copy and sign it and send it back, or are you gonna?
Well, this was to basically pass this as a policy for SWAN, that there's a new policy in place. We'd want to make all the directors aware of it with the revised wording. And then also with this policy being in place, as we start to do more and more with some of the more web-based system, parts of our system, we could make staff aware that, this is the policy, or library, libraries aware, this is the new policy that you have to follow. I think Dawn and our concern was what was happening was that this was something that, every individual was having to basically review with Stephen, essentially an agreement to get a login and password. And I felt like it's something that we should, potentially streamline and make a SWAN policy. And in that way we can say this was a board reviewed policy that was approved, and then we make the membership aware of it. So thanks, Don, for bringing up where a lot of these policies live in the SWAN support site. Circulation, database management, identity protection.
Okay, great. Do you want to vote on this? Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Are we prepared to vote? All right, can I have a motion to approve the library use policy, please?
I move.
And a second?
I second.
And a roll call.
Okay. Blazik,
Yes.
O'Davis,
Yes.
Bussey,
Yes.
Petrill,
Yes.
Jenkins,
Yes.
Milivek,
Yes.
and Whitman.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Aaron, the EBSCO group purchase renewal.
I've sent out a couple SwanCom about this. The vote, as you can see, is recorded here. This comes directly from the electronic ballot system, My Direct Vote. There were at least two directors that approached me that said, they approached me very late in the process, meaning the ballot was closing that evening, at the end of the evening, and I got emails long after I had logged off. So they said that they never had received the login information, which I just pointed out. That was why I was sending out the SwanComs to alert everyone. You need to look for the login information. So at least we learned that that can happen. The My Direct Vote did not report any bounces. So there is a report here after the results, Dawn, if you don't mind scrolling down a little bit. It shows the voting as it occurred over, the time that the ballot was open. And then this is the one that could be a little confusing, like, why is there nothing here? The bounced emails, there weren't any. So I'm not sure what happened. That said, for at least, I can alert any directors that when we do the next round for what I want to do for the budget approval, that if they don't get anything, I can send them the information to them directly. Since the emails went out from the My Direct Vote system, for whatever reason, a couple folks didn't get anything. And Jacob at Oakbrook being one of them, he put some time in talking with the village IT to see, did they get the email or not. So he was really kind of looking into it a little further. So right now we've had 3 libraries opt out. I sent out a reminder this morning. I think we'll probably get a few more coming in. I don't have my email up to see whether or not that's happening or not. But I'll recalculate where things are at and just send out a preliminary estimate of what the EBSCO costs look like. I promise to do that on Monday, just because I think there are directors worried that if there were, a huge number of libraries opted out, they may have to opt out based on a price increase. Are you guys hearing anything from anyone other than, I think during the lead up to the vote, there was maybe some chatter, some questions?
I haven't heard anything since voting started.
All right. And I've already told you the updates I did to this budget. So this is one more pass for you all. If there's any changes you want to make, or if you've heard anything, you can incorporate that. But essentially, the only thing I would change in here is just the date and title, saying this is the proposed budget for the March quarterly approval. But I'll post it and send out a ballot for that. I did share with Dawn, Betsy, and Ted a question that came in from Ben Westlow at West Chicago. I think we answered his questions as far as, you know, anything. He didn't have anything specific about budget. It's more around process. Don, I don't know if that's worth sharing, just everyone, how some of the link directors may be sharing this budget a little bit more detail with their boards.
The way that you know, Link was governed at one point, our governing board was all library trustees. And then at one point we changed that to it being the administrators. But one of the things we left in place, sort of to ease the minds of some trustees that were still on the library boards that knew how it had been previously, was that we still took the budget to them each year for them to approve, meaning each library board to approve. And so Ben's question, the best I could tell, because I agree with you, it was worded kind of funny, but I think was getting at, you know, how do I get my board involved in this? You know, they're going to want to have a say, and the way I'm reading what you're putting out, Aaron, is they don't necessarily get a say, you know, but I'm going to give them a say, and if they vote against it, what am I supposed to do? Was kind of what his question was, but I really think it's coming from that. That's the way, you know, we did it. And for old historical reasons, you know, in the development of Link.
And it's perfectly fine if he wants to follow that process and get his trustees' input. And as I told him, I said, if you're feeling uncomfortable voting yes on something that they said no on, you can vote no. But it's just going to be very different for them, you know, knowing that there's, you know, 100 libraries and it's in Link. What was Link's largest size? Were you?
I think
9?
the largest was 9, exactly.
No. A little different.
Right. And
Yeah.
I know you guys look at it just the same way like I do. It's in your budget, so your board approves it as part of your budget, as your, you know, overall library budget, where he's still thinking of it a little bit more as like it's over his spending threshold, and so they need to approve it. And I really think it just goes back to that history of that's the way we did it at Link.
Ted, do you have a comment?
No, not on that. No, but I will say that regarding the budget, we had the committee of the whole meeting. It was extremely well attended and there were no questions at that time. So I feel like you can feel pretty confident that the membership understands and is prepared to pass this budget.
Yeah, I got that same feeling.
And to your credit, Aaron, I think part of the reason there were no questions is because you did such a great job. You know, it's so thorough. You've got all the comments, and you know, they understand. They do budgeting themselves too, and so I think that's a lot of the reason why there weren't a lot of questions or any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we have had some committee of the wholes for the budget that have gone on for hours. So that's what I was prepared for. So
Yeah.
it was really nice when it was like 10:30 and I was like adjourned.
I know there was crickets. I mean, nothing in chat, nothing. Nobody opened their mic. It was crazy.
It was very unexpected.
It was
I was
unexpected.
expecting, you know, a lot more than that.
different priorities right now, I think, for a lot of folks. So
It's true.
I do have a draft agenda for the quarterly if you're ready to move on from the budget. And, you know, like I said, the electronic ballot is what I'm going to use to get the budget approved. And then we'll also use that to do the board election. But I'll use a self-nomination form also for, you know, we'll open that up at some point to have directors that are interested to put their name forward for the seats. So as Ted noted, when we get to that part of when we announce the dates and when the form is open, if you're talking, you know, with your colleagues and they're maybe on the fence about, you know, maybe putting their name forward, there'll be a way where they can, you know, write up and submit their name. It's not going to necessarily go through anything like a board committee per se. Stacy can attest to this. We've really kind of gone back and forth a lot of different ways of how do we get people to, you know, self-nominate. I think just having an open forum for self-nomination and you all just networking with your colleagues has been probably the most effective way. And of course, if we're not getting any names in, then I'll send out a red alert. Is there anything else you would want to have discussed at the March meeting? Are there things that you think would be of value, or it's like keep the meeting just sort of tight and focused? Is there a topic that you would want? I think our firesides are doing a good job at a lot of that.
You've got Aspen on here. Did you want to say anything about Kit Keeper in this meeting?
I'm not sure we'll be ready to.
Got it.
Good suggestion, though.
Well, is this a good time to talk about that user agreement?
Yes. Make note of that.
You know, the study that was done, the curbside study, and I don't know if you'd want it to go out in this meeting, but did it go anywhere other than just in our packet?
It went to you guys first. We're going to put it under our research area on the support site, and we will do a news post. So it will kind of be promoted this next week.
Great, because just, yeah, thinking, you know, there may be libraries out there that could really benefit from reading, you know, and not having to recreate the wheel.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you. Ted, back to you. If there's anything more you want to cover today.
Do you want to talk about the internal controls?
Oh, yeah, wait. I don't have the agenda up.
That's okay. Yeah, there's just one more thing, and it's these internal.
Okay. So the internal controls document, it may be a little difficult to read, but what I was doing was at least indicating an update as far as whether or not we would want to use this bill pay. And so I changed some of the wording from the signature stamp into a new section as far as the bill pay. And I'm not sure how you all feel about it. I also be curious to see how you feel about, maybe in the future, the use of this in lieu of like us doing all of our checks, run through our accounting system. We could potentially do it through the bank, but I don't know how you all feel about that, or if you have any sort of approach to that within your own libraries as far as like cutting checks, or your trustees are always like reviewing and signing them.
Well, it really varies from library to library. I can tell you that, having had multiple boards across multiple libraries. Like in my library right now, I mean, my board sees the checks weeks after they've been mailed to the vendor. Like they're just like, whatever. And in my previous library, they signed them in the meeting, like then and there, two trustees, with microscopes looking at them. So the process can be really, really variable. And it's oftentimes it's driven by tradition, but it's also driven by your auditor. So I was wondering, has our auditor chimed in on the reasonability of using bill pay? Because I mean, hell yeah, we all want the most convenient, easy thing. I hate signing all of those checks every month. But I would think that our auditor may have an opinion on the appropriate way to do this, given that these are governmental funds.
Well, this gets at the next thing, which is the audit proposals for our next auditor. I'm wrapping that up, and so Dawn, I'll be reaching out to you to set up some time to review these with me. So perhaps if you're okay with leaving these internal controls as they're modified to only use that bill pay in that limited fashion, we can find out from our auditor how they feel about anything like a bill pay and the internal controls for SWAN. And you're right, Ted. I get the sense that it's going to be more the auditor than maybe us saying whether or not we should or shouldn't use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us submit our internal control narrative to the auditor every year, saying this is exactly how we handle, we have like a 5-page narrative that we have to submit with our audit paperwork every year, and change any names that have changed and all of that. So I imagine the auditor will have something to say about this.
Okay.
But yes, in terms of utilities and the things that have to be paid, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
The thing that stands out to me is the cost, because we do a lot of our bills in the same manner, but we don't pay a per transaction fee for it.
With your banking system?
Correct. I don't know if that's unusual or not.
Jesse, are you doing online pay, or does your bank actually issue a physical check? Because that's what this is.
Right. I guess I'm thinking of online pay.
I think this is a little different because they cut an actual check.
It is a check.
Yeah, so that'd be the difference. The stamp, basically.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, if you're okay with how it is as modified, I'll put this in place and post this on the SWAN support site, because that's where we also are updating all these policies and control documents, just to be transparent with the membership. And it's an easy place for you all to find everything related to board responsibilities, activities. So I'll make these changes, and then just heads up, Dawn, we'll be having to look over some audit proposals, and I'll put together the proposals, and then perhaps maybe a scoring sheet for us to sort of independently score what we think of the proposals that we got.
Sounds great. I'll be on the watch for it.
Okay.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they'd like to put before the board today?
I have a non-SWAN board question once we adjourn, if you guys have just a minute.
Sure. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move.
And a second?
I second.
Roll call?
Okay. Blazik,
Yes.
O'Davis,
Yes.
Bussey,
Yes.
Petrill,
Yes.
Jenkins,
Yes.
Milovek,
Yes.
and Whitman.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Go ahead, Don.
I have